Hook. The first time Captain Elias Vance stepped onto the bridge of the alien warship, he knew something was off. The air had the faintest trace of something metallic, like an old copper coin pressed against his tongue. It wasn't the recycled oxygen mix. Human ships had that same stale aftertaste. No, this was something else. Something ancient, something that made the hair on his arms stand up even before the 6-foot-tall reptilian ambassador extended a clawed hand toward him in greeting. "Captain Vance, we have much to discuss," the alien rasped. Its voice was low and layered, as if multiple speakers spoke at once. "The blood contract must be honored." Vance didn't flinch. He'd been in the Terran diplomatic corps for over a decade. He'd brokered deals with species that could liquefy a human body with a glance, who communicated through pheromones, through bursts of radiation, even through dreams. But this was new. "Right," he said, adjusting his uniform. "Let's get to it." The ambassador's slitted eyes flicked to the table between them. It was old, obsidian black, and smooth as glass. Ancient carvings, glyphs that pulsed dimly under the surface, hinted at something far older than either of them. A contract table, they had called it. Behind Vance, his second-in-command, Lieutenant Arya Zhao, cleared her throat. "Captain, I don't like this. We still don't know what the stakes are. The Khazar have been less than forthcoming." The Khazar were one of the oldest empires in the known galaxy, a species that had once ruled over half the Orion Arm. They were warriors, but more than that, they were bound by their word. An oath given was an oath honored, even to the death. This made them both highly respected and incredibly dangerous. Vance turned back to the Khazar ambassador. "Let's clear this up first. What exactly does this contract entail?" The ambassador's scaled lips curled in what might have been a smile or a warning. "It is a pact, sealed in blood, as our ancestors have done for millennia. A mutual bond of protection, trade, and alliance. And what happens if one side breaks it?" Zhao pressed, her arms crossed. The ambassador's eyes gleamed. "Death." A beat of silence followed. "Of course it is," Vance muttered under his breath. He took a breath, forcing himself to maintain composure. "All right. Blood contract. What does that actually look like?" The Khazar ambassador stepped forward, gesturing at the table. "Each party must make an offering, blood, given freely. The table records the bond. Once written, it cannot be undone." Zhao shot him a look. "Sir, this is crazy. We don't even know what's in the fine print." Vance agreed. Every instinct told him to be cautious. The Khazar had spent centuries waging wars and making alliances that lasted eons. Humanity, by comparison, was still the newcomer to interstellar politics. But they also had a reputation. Humans were unpredictable, resilient. And this deal might mean survival in an increasingly hostile galaxy. Vance exhaled through his nose. "All right. We need more information before we agree to anything. Show us the contract." The ambassador placed a clawed hand on the obsidian table. The moment it made contact, the carvings flared to life. A script, written in ancient Khazar glyphs, flowed across the surface. Some of the symbols shifted into English before Vance's eyes. The terms were simple, too simple. A pact of blood. A bond of war. A promise of eternal brotherhood. Vance narrowed his eyes. "What does bond of war mean, exactly?" The ambassador rumbled, the sound reverberating through the chamber. "Should either of our peoples be threatened, the other must come to their aid. Without hesitation. Without question." Zhao swore under her breath. "So if they decide to start a war tomorrow, we're locked in?" The ambassador's gaze didn't waver. "As are we, should humanity be threatened." That changed things. The Khazar were old. Experienced. Their fleets could blot out suns. If humanity could count on their strength, it would cement their place in the galactic sphere overnight. But the cost? Vance flexed his fingers. He needed more time. More information. But he knew stalling too long could be seen as an insult. "Before I sign anything, I need to know one thing," he said. "Why us?" The ambassador tilted its head. "Because we have seen what your kind does when backed into a corner. You do not break. You do not surrender. You fight. You survive. That is a species worthy of a bond. Vance exchanged glances with Zhao. Humanity's reputation preceded them. One more thing, he said. You said the contract is sealed in blood. What happens if a human, let's say me, signs it, but future generations want out? The ambassador's expression didn't change. They will not. The contract is binding. Eternal. Vance ran a hand down his face. Right. Of course. Zhao leaned in close, voice low. Captain, this is insane. We can't lock humanity into something for eternity. He understood her concerns. But he also saw the opportunity. We need allies, Zhao, he murmured back. And if they trust us enough to forge an eternal pact, maybe that's worth something. Zhao still looked uneasy, but she didn't argue further. Vance turned back to the table. The ambassador extended a small, razor-edged knife. Will you sign? Vance hesitated only for a moment. Then he took the blade, pressed it to his palm, and let his blood drip onto the obsidian surface. The table flared, absorbing the offering. The deal was sealed. And humanity's fate was bound in ink and blood. Hook, the moment the blood seeped into the obsidian table, Captain Elias Vance knew there was no turning back. The air thickened, charged with unseen energy, and a low hum reverberated through the chamber. Something ancient had been set in motion, something that had been waiting for millennia. Across from him, the Kaiser ambassador exhaled sharply, their slitted eyes gleaming with what might have been approval or something far more calculating. Vance clenched his fist, feeling the sting of the shallow cut on his palm. His blood had been taken willingly, but the consequences of that act remained unknown. Lieutenant Arya Zhao shifted uneasily beside him, her hands tense at her sides. The weight of what they had just done settled heavily between them. It is done, the ambassador intoned. The pact has been sealed. The symbols on the table pulsed once, then faded, leaving only the smooth, obsidian surface behind. The room, which had felt charged with anticipation, seemed suddenly silent, as if even the walls were waiting to see what came next. Zhao broke the stillness first. Captain, we need to talk. Now. Vance exhaled slowly. Ambassador, if you'll excuse us, we need to confer with our own people. The Kaiser dipped their head in what passed for a nod among their kind. Understandable. But know this, once a bond of blood is forged, the universe itself bears witness. Breaking it invites ruin. Vance didn't respond. He turned on his heel, Zhao close behind, as they exited the chamber and made their way back to the human delegation's quarters aboard the Kaiser vessel. The moment the door slid shut behind them, Zhao rounded on him. Sir, what the hell was that? An eternal blood pact? Are you serious? He held up a hand. I know it looks bad. But we need to think long-term. We just secured an alliance with one of the most powerful species in the galaxy. At what cost? Zhao demanded. We have no idea what we've locked ourselves into. She gestured to his hand. That wasn't just a signature, Captain. That was blood. Our blood. The Kaiser don't make casual deals, they live by their oaths. What happens when they demand something we can't give? Vance ran a hand down his face. I'm not blind to the risks, Lieutenant. But we're in a galaxy that sees us as expendable newcomers. The only way we survive is by making allies. Real allies. The kind who would fight for us if the time came. Zhao exhaled sharply, but he could see the conflict in her eyes. And if we've just handed them the keys to humanity's future without even knowing what we signed up for? Before Vance could answer, the ship's comm system crackled to life. Captain Vance, report to the bridge immediately. We have an incoming transmission from Earth. They exchanged glances. Let's go, Vance said, already moving. The Kaiser warship's bridge was dimly lit, its control panels pulsing with unfamiliar alien runes. The human communications officer, Ensign Darrow, turned as they entered. Sir, it's Admiral Kale. She insists on speaking with you now. Vance nodded and stepped forward as the holographic display flickered to life. The stern face of Admiral Helena Kale filled the screen. She was the highest-ranking officer in the Terran Diplomatic Corps, and her expression was unreadable. Captain Vance, she said coolly. Explain. He straightened. Admiral, we've successfully secured a military and trade alliance with the Kaiser. The Blood Pact. I know what you did, Captain, Kale interrupted. And I'm calling to tell you that you may have just dragged humanity into a war we're not ready for. The room went still. War? Zhao asked, eyes narrowing. With who? Kale's expression darkened. 3 hours ago, a Kaiser fleet engaged the Viashan Dominion in open combat. The Viashan have been expanding aggressively, but up until now, they hadn't dared provoke a direct confrontation. Now they have. And since you've signed a blood pact with the Kaiser, Vance felt the weight of the realization drop onto his shoulders. We're bound to fight with them. Kale nodded. The Viashan are ruthless. They don't take prisoners, and they don't negotiate. If we're at war with them, it won't be a war we can afford to lose. Zhao swore under her breath. Captain, tell me you have a plan for this. Vance's mind raced. The Kaiser had gained a powerful ally in humanity, but had humanity just inherited an enemy it couldn't afford? Admiral, I need more details. How bad is it? Kale's jaw tightened. Bad. The Viashan have already sent us a transmission. They consider our alliance with the Kaiser an act of aggression. Their exact words were, prepare to be cleansed. Vance exhaled slowly. So they mean to wipe us out. Kale nodded. They'll start with outposts, colonies on the edges of Terran space. Then they'll come for the core worlds. And Captain, we don't have the fleet to stop them alone. Vance turned back to the Kaiser ambassador, who had joined them on the bridge. You knew this would happen, didn't you? The ambassador's reptilian eyes met his without flinching. The Viashan have long desired to challenge us. Your people were always a target, Captain. With us, you stand a chance. Alone, you would have fallen, regardless. So we were just another piece in your war, Zhao muttered. The ambassador didn't deny it. But now, you are not alone. You fight with the strength of the Kaiser Empire behind you. Vance closed his eyes briefly. The deal had already been made. There was no undoing it now. He turned back to Kale. We'll need reinforcements, supply lines, and immediate military coordination with the Kaiser. We don't have time to hesitate. Kale studied him for a long moment before giving a single, curt nod. Then let's prepare for war. Hook, the moment the first Viashan warships dropped out of hyperspace, Captain Elias Vance knew they were out of time. The colossal vessels materialized against the black void, their sleek obsidian hulls glistening with the light of distant stars. No warning. No prelude. Just the silent, unmistakable promise of annihilation. Multiple enemy contact. Ensign Darrow shouted over the alarms blaring through the Kaiser flagship's bridge. They're forming an attack pattern. They're not waiting. Vance tightened his grip on the command console. Raise shields. Prepare to return fire. Get me a channel to the Kaiser fleet. The Kaiser ambassador stood beside him, unfazed. The Viashan do not hesitate. Neither must we. Lieutenant Arya Zhao muttered a curse under her breath. They're not wasting time on pleasantries. They came to exterminate. Then let's give them something to regret, Vance said. Across the battlefield, the Kaiser fleet shifted into formation. Their vessels were unlike anything in the human fleet, organic-looking, almost insectoid in shape, their hulls adorned with glowing war sigils pulsing in synchrony. A dozen ships moved in perfect unison, forming a defensive arc around the flagship. Incoming transmission from the Viashan, Darrow reported. Audio only. A distorted voice crackled through the speakers, thick with contempt. You have signed your death warrant, humans. Your kind should have known better than to ally with vermin. Vance's jaw tightened. That's rich, coming from the species that wipes out entire planets without a second thought. A guttural hiss. Your extinction is inevitable. Your blood pact only delays the end. Vance cut the channel. Enough talk. Zhao, weapons status? Locked and loaded, but we're outgunned, she said. We've got a fraction of their firepower. If we don't do something fast, they'll punch through us in minutes. The Kaiser ambassador stepped forward. You are bound to us, Captain. Now let us show you why that is not a mistake. The Kaiser warships suddenly pulsed with energy, their hulls radiating waves of bright golden light. The entire fleet surged forward, moving like a single entity. A ripple of space distortion rippled outward from them, some kind of collective combat enhancement Vance had never seen before. "What the hell are they doing?" Zhao asked. The answer came in the form of a devastating first strike. The Kaiser ships opened fire, unleashing beams of concentrated energy that carved through the Viation front lines like a blade through paper. Enemy ships exploded in bursts of white fire, their shields barely holding against the onslaught. "Holy hell!" Zhao breathed. "I take it back. We might actually have a chance." But the Viation weren't so easily broken. Their remaining vessels regrouped, shifting into a staggered phalanx formation. Vance recognized the tactic immediately. "They're adapting," he said. "They're drawing us in. We need to break their counteroffensive before it's too late." Zhao nodded, already working. "We can coordinate with the Kaiser's targeting systems, enhance precision strikes. It'll take some fast calculations, but if we sync our weapons to their biosignatures." "Do it," Vance ordered. "Darrow, send tactical data to the fleet. I want every ship linked in." As the battle raged, human and Kaiser forces fought as one. The Viation pressed their advantage, but the combined fleet held the line, refusing to yield. Space became a storm of fire and debris, wreckage drifting through the void like ghosts of the fallen. "Damage report," Vance shouted. "Shields at 60%, Zhao replied. "We've lost 3 of our forward frigates, but their formation is breaking." The Kaiser ambassador turned to Vance. "Now is the time to end this. We must strike at their command vessel." Vance grimaced. "Easier said than done. The Viation don't expose their leaders." "They will," the ambassador said, "if given the right incentive." Vance glanced at the tactical display. The enemy command ship lurked at the rear, shielded by an array of escort vessels. But the Kaiser were already moving, executing a maneuver so precise it was almost artful. The moment their fleet feigned a retreat, the Viation capital ship surged forward, drawn out by the apparent weakness. A fatal mistake. "Zhao, fire everything we've got at that ship. Now." Human and Kaiser weapons locked onto the command vessel and unleashed a barrage of devastation. The Viation flagship buckled under the impact, explosions rupturing along its hull. Its shields flickered and died. A second later, a final coordinated strike from the Kaiser warships delivered the killing blow. The Viation command vessel detonated in a blinding flash, sending shockwaves across the battlefield. The remaining enemy ships faltered, some attempting to flee, others simply frozen in disbelief. And just like that, the tide of battle turned. Vance exhaled, hands shaking with adrenaline. "Status? They're retreating," Zhao confirmed. "Holy hell, they're actually running." The Kaiser ambassador turned to Vance, eyes gleaming. "You have fought well, human. The blood pact holds." Vance didn't smile. He knew this was only the beginning. "Then let's make sure they never come back." Hook, the battlefield was silent. The wreckage of Viation warships drifted aimlessly, their once proud fleet reduced to smoldering debris. The void that had been alive with destruction only moments ago now seemed eerily still, as if the universe itself held its breath in the aftermath of the carnage. Captain Elias Vance watched the retreating remnants of the Viation forces disappear into the depths of space. The enemy had been broken, their command vessel obliterated, their morale shattered. And yet, despite the victory, he knew that this was not the end. Lieutenant Arya Zhao exhaled sharply. "We did it. We actually did it." Vance nodded, exhaustion creeping into his bones. "We held the line. But at what cost?" The Kaiser ambassador stepped forward, their reptilian gaze unblinking. "You fought with honor, Captain. The blood pact has been fulfilled. The Viation will not return." Vance studied the alien leader carefully. "And if they do?" The ambassador's voice was unwavering. "Then we will fight again. Together." The weight of those words settled over Vance. The alliance they had forged had been tested in fire and blood, and it had held. Humanity had proven itself not as pawns, not as expendable newcomers, but as warriors deserving of respect. But he knew there was more to leadership than victory. "We need to rebuild," he said. "Both our forces and our people. This war may be over, but peace is a battle we'll have to fight every day." Zhao nodded. "We should check in with Earth, let them know what's happened. And we need to help the Kaiser recover their losses. We weren't the only ones who bled today." The ambassador inclined their head in acknowledgement. "We do not forget those who stand with us in battle. Nor do we forsake them in peace." Vance took a slow breath. "Then let's start there." Aboard the Kaiser flagship, the human and alien crews worked side by side, repairing what they could, tending to the wounded, and honoring the fallen. For the first time in history, humanity had fought not just for itself, but for something greater. And in doing so, they had secured not only survival but a future among the stars. As Vance gazed out into the endless void, he understood the true weight of the pact they had signed. This wasn't just about war, it was about trust, about the bonds forged through hardship, about the legacy they would leave behind. A deal signed in blood and ink had changed the course of history. And in that moment, he knew, humanity had earned its place in the stars. Moral strength is not merely in war, but in the alliances we build. True power lies in unity, in standing together when the darkness comes. And the greatest victories are not just those fought on the battlefield, but those that pave the way for a better future.